So the latest number from the Faithhood network. So Faithhood network is a Discord server or where they have open source, like people normal like us, compiling the numbers and do the mapping. The latest number is 108 towns and cities have protests in Iran. So I'm not sure if it's all at the same time, but this is the total so far in Iran, and a huge number of them. Yeah, so every day there's more and more towns starting to.
Are there any solidarity protests in Europe, in the Iranian communities? I mean, I know there was some stuff here with Venezuelans and stuff about Venezuela. Has there been any in anyone's?
I know of one in London. I know of one in London, but I don't know of the size of it. But yeah, generally the diaspora is the majority of the diaspora is against the regime. That's why they are the diaspora.
I mean, the only thing I've seen here in the States is I've seen like NPR type shows on YouTube and stuff where they're talking about, but I don't put a lot of those because those are people that don't live in Iran and don't really have the problems the Iranians have. They just don't like the regime. So, but I mean, that's all I've seen here. I haven't seen like any street protests like you saw with Palestine or Venezuela or anything.
Well, I think one thing that is very notable with if you compare the one that is going now compared to what was before, usually with like the mass uprising and whatever before those, some of them were actually larger than this one. That's true. There's still quite a lot of people on the streets, but it's not that massive thing. Like Wyatt pointed out that he did not think it's a revolution yet, but I would say that it's fast approaching in that direction, and the reason would be. One, like Wyatt pointed out, the protests are all over the country, and this is not like a reactionary response. It's not a reaction. Yes, it's true that the economic factors triggered it, but that's not the first time there's been protests on these. And it was also predicted that when this happens, because of the comprehensive ineptitude of the Islamic Republic, this was expected to happen, irregardless of sanctions in Israel. Even many consider whether true or not is a different matter. But more importantly, it's the economic factors and also social things like, for example, the hijab laws and the apprehension and incarceration for violation of certain laws like that. This is no longer it. That has been the case before, but this time they're not only saying like they're against a certain policy, they're saying outright they're against the regime, and more importantly, they are pointing out an alternative, because before they didn't used to say Javid Shah, for example, which means the long live the king or something, and that is explicitly to the Shah, the one that the Americans are having right now. I understand that many people might be thinking he was just a dictator, and fair enough, but as far as Iranians are concerned, the Islamic Republic is hardly any better. And when they view back in their history, right, and they are the ones who are living their lives in this, as far as they are concerned, the best option that they have, many are concerned, the best option that they have is the Shah, but not as the Shah was as a dictator, but the Shah as a constitutional monarch. So yes, there are some divides therein as well, but the important thing is that the demonstrators on the streets, they are first of all, they are making that explicit. This was a red line. This was a red line you could not do if you were an Iranian, for obvious reasons. If you are voicing, like, you can object to, for example, the hijab, the regime, and stuff like that. This will be perhaps a breach of law, or some sort of contrarian attitude. But when you are voicing support for the Shah and you're voicing support for Israel, that is at the very least an act of sedition, if not treason. It will be so in any country, really. You're voicing support for an adversary or the previous ruler you could, right? And yes, okay, the Islamic Republic didn't coup them directly. It was this Marxist revolution that toppled the Shah, and then the Islamic Republic couped the Marxists, and from there on we have this thing, right? So the thing more important, I think, like whether you have it, okay, they're legitimate or whatever, or I am pro the US or Iran or whatever, all those kind of things. The fact is that the Islamic Republic, they don't even qualify as illegitimate rulers. And I pointed this out last year, at the end of last summer, and because this one I thought was incredibly telling, and it has held through until now. Namely, the change that they did in the hijab laws 1 to 2 weeks after Assad fell. It wasn't that they made it more. It wasn't that they made it more stringent or anything like that. Sure, there were some of those factors, but what actually made it noteworthy was that they permitted foreigners to be the morality police, to enforce the hijab laws, because they were not actually able to do that well themselves. So no matter how you twist and turn it, if you need foreigners to enforce any of your domestic laws, that you're even permitting such a thing, that's a sign of weakness, a very strong, clear sign of weakness. And from there on, we have seen what's happened. Like, this is not the first protest that it's been since the end of last summer. They've been going in waves. But this Islamic Republic's ability to resist it, its internal security apparatuses, very clearly degraded. And it's not only by Israel, in the sense that they cannot be acquiring as many of the, like Hezbollah, for example. They used that in the Massa uprising, and they've used their other proxies and draw them back in case those things happen. This time around, not only are they lacking severely in that, but you can notice very clearly in the Basij, which are the main internal security forces along the whole plethora. Typically, they will be much, much better organized than they are now. What are you seeing? Even if the protests are not that massive, one thing is that they're all over the place. So arguably, that's going to make it harder for the Basij. But more importantly, that because they are not that overwhelming, the Basij should be able to do exactly as they did all the other times. Line up, enforce, clamp down, and start whooping until this shit passes over. They usually, like, whether you like it the way they're doing it or not, now there are cases, like Euro was correct, there are violent cases, but just like Vaughn was pointing out, you cannot go to the Islamic Republic and say, oh, I'm going to file a complaint or whatever, and put me in handcuffs. You can only do that in countries where that is possible. So violence becomes a prerequisite when the internal security forces, like the Basij, because you will easily find also footages where they are shooting straight into the crowd, right? And of course, that's risks that everything spirals out of control. But when you look at the Basij, not actually responding in kind, and they do so if you look at all the other protests that have been before, within 2, maybe 3 days, they will be out in force. They will be starting smacking, whooping, shooting, but whatever is necessary to get this shit under control. Here, we're over a week. There's barely any momentum from the security forces. They seem almost non-reactive. Many places we're actually seeing them, they're just kind of like, yeah, I'm not really sure I want to be a part of this. I'm just going to stand here because I'm paid to, but I don't want to get myself into more trouble than necessary. And the Basij from the beginning, also, this is not something they usually did. They called in the IRCG to do the heavy work almost right away, which is very surprising. This is something that they would do, but they have yet done. And the IRCG has also, GC, have basically flatly refused to do so in any meaningful capacity. And that is understandable because here you have Trump and you have Israel. The IRGC are a military. So they're like, sure, there's a secondary military apart from the ordinary army, which is also noteworthy. There's a lot more defections that have occurred since last summer from the ordinary army and the IRGC. And that's why this is very telling. This is why this is not an ordinary demonstration that Iran, the Islamic Republic, have had many times before, because they would typically be having the response to it at this point. So, and the thing with Trump and Israel, I think it makes them more apprehensive, because they understand that as soon as they actually do show up in force, they might give the incentive for the Israelis and the Americans to act. But whether the Americans or the Israelis would actually do so, I'm not so sure about that, because it's very risky, especially when it's not like the 12-day war where the civilians were, somewhat be located in. Now it's all over the place, right? So there's a very high chance that before you know it, you're trying to help out. What you're actually doing is killing a whole bunch of, those you're trying to utilize, be it as a psyop or a tool, irrelevant. You're trying to use them to take over the regime, and here you're smacking on your own, the ones you're supposed to kind of help, right? That's going to be a really bad look. So, yeah, I rambled a whole lot, and now everybody left. I hope everybody didn't run away because of me.
No. I think James going to gym. I think Maddie maybe don't have things to add on Iran, and don't know, Von just disappeared. It's okay. We have Lambo.
Yeah, if you wait 5 minutes, I'm still busy to eat. So
Yeah, no problem. One Lambo equals to 5 people is okay. No.
I'm not sure if the audience is going to be willing to stand me rambling on for another 5 minutes.
No, but
we
if you're looking now, looking now at the situation in Iraq, Trump is busy saying, like, he's still busy targeting Iran. So and I think he's working on more sides than only the processing citizens. Still notice that Iran is an ally of Russia. You still have the problem in Yemen with the Red Sea. So still have problems to solve. So I'm just wondering, is 2026 going to change a lot of that or not?
I question the notion that the Islamic Republic are allies with anyone. Honestly, they seem to be more like a subjugated client state of both of China in particular, but also like look at the Russians, right? Like to them, the Iranians aren't really that important. They don't need the oil. They certainly don't need the technology or the drones from it. Sure, it's helped to have them, but the Russians have, as far as I understood it, they've reversed engineered and also made significantly better drones than the Islamic Republic. And what do you see now? Like you saw pretty much nothing from either during the 12-day war, which it was quite telling in the first place. Russia, understandably, because of Ukraine, and also like if you've already lost off of Syria, do you really want to get yourself into another like shit? You kind of made a fool out of yourself. So that makes sense from Russia's side. But then what is the predicament for the Islamic Republic now? Nobody is going to bet for a loser. That's why nobody really did anything for Venezuela, because they're pathetic and weak. Okay, the Islamic Republic is the natural regional hegemon of the Middle East. Iran has historically been, and is for a variety of metrics, destined to recurringly be the natural regional hegemon. Here, they have a bout with this little fly, basically. That's what Israel is. Israel has, in all throughout history, if Israel has ever been a thing, it has been a vassal, a protectorate of of Iran, right? Iran is the bigger brother here. Yet, here just the fly comes by, flaps its wing, and the whole shit just crashes together. Like, what the hell is going on, right? So, yeah, they're not even they don't even qualify as illegitimate rulers. You should be able to, like, even no matter how like you coup the Marxists and all that kind of jazz, all the moralism and all that stuff doesn't matter. If you cannot actually hold Iran, and if you get your ass so thoroughly whooped, and with all that leverage that you should actually be having internally, you have no allies, you have no bigger brothers, you don't even have peers, and all your proxies are utter shit. It's like sending a bunch of insects into the fire. They just, sure, they cause damage, they cause an issue. But what was the end result of it all? The end result is that when the Islamic Republic was the next one in line, when one expected the big boss and whatever, it was utterly pathetic. It's like it's insulting almost. Like it's like if the Middle East is trolling us, right? So the Islamic Republic, good riddance. I hope the next thing the Iranians come up with is way better.
Yeah. So just now among all the conversations, which reminds me of something I said a long time ago when we first talked, on Open Mic, we talked about the multipolar world, and then I was saying that multipolar world is going to be more wars. And during those days we haven't reached there, but strongly yet. People were saying that Wyatt, you're wrong. They think that it's going to be more peaceful because we're going to have like China and Russia, counterbalance. Yeah. So now people can see for themselves what's happening. China and Russia's foreign policy has never been like they go over there and protect you. Only United States does that, which is why the multipolar world is not going to be what people imagine it to be. It's going to be worse. So now we see just that the United States right now is way stronger than we thought that United States will be in the multipolar world. The current United States is too strong. So we are slowly rolling back into the hegemony of United States, slowly rolling back. Not yet there yet, but we are slowly rolling back because China has been too weak. China and Russia both is unwilling to assert themselves overseas, far away from their land, like United States would. So they are more towards like a regional power kind of thing. And Iran is actually decently near to both Russia and China, and both decided not to do anything. So yeah,
I don't blame
people
them.
need to.
I don't blame them. They call themselves the Islamic Republic. Just 1 or 2 years ago,
both of them are afraid of the Islamic terrorism. So
well, not only that, but because there was at this point last year or the year before that the Islamic Republic, the state media, they just had to actually just lay it on the ground that they had closed over 50. So anyone can search this up. They had to close over 50,000 mosques out of 75,000 across the country. They had to close 50,000. Now, to put that into proper context, because I know some people might find that 2/3 isn't really telling you anything, even though it's clearly a lot, and it's called the Islamic Republic. But most of these 50,000 mosques that were built were after the Islamic Republic came to power. So it went from 25 when they came to 75. And now 40, 50 years later, they have to put it down due to lack of attendance. Okay. This is why you would find quite a lot of Muslims are part of these protests that are the dissidents. They don't view them as legitimate, even from the name Islamic Republic. Like they just they don't qualify. They don't qualify by and pretty much any metrics. So really, it's kind of astonishing that they've been able to keep themselves together and project their power, because that's actually quite impressive. Like I think that's why many of us thought that the Islamic Republic will be much more powerful, especially when you started getting to their home turf. But they clearly, like, if they, yeah, they must have overstretched themselves a lot more than it seemed. So I mean, they're not even a paper tiger; they're more like a paper
Because-
chicken at this point.
Yeah, I still remember watching or reading so-called. Now I realize it's propaganda. Like the Iranians developing radars that can, they're super massive, able to detect stealth fighters and all sort of the new technologies that they indigenously developed. They're so powerful, and then it's like they can't defend themselves. That means all they have is terror weapons. It's like in World War II, Germany developed terror weapons, right? V1, V2, V3. But these are weapons that you can't win war with. It's just to create chaos.
Yeah, just like the saturation strikes. So that's much more damage towards Israel than anyone else could do. But you would be expecting a lot more better. Like if you look at the pattern of escalatory dominance that they pursued against each other, the Israelis, they used strikes, assassinations, and what have you, right? The response that the Islamic Republic had, the only one that had any sort of notable effect, was saturation strikes, which is basically early 20th century doctrine, right? Even the Russians and the Ukrainians, they started maybe in the beginning with some saturation strikes, but they gave it up for good reasons. The precision munitions are very expensive, but yeah, the dumb missiles, and you have to use a ton of them, are also expensive. You have to muster the troops and the launchers there, and that's exactly where you could see the second thing, because the mass of volleys where the Islamic Republic when the Islamic Republic was at most overwhelming the Israelis was like at day 3 or 4. Like it was fairly early in the 12-day war. After which it all just trickled off completely, and the reason was Bigari, I believe, he pointed out accurately, was because many of these launchers are big, they're easy to spot, and they take hours often to establish. And then when you're going to be launching them, right, through all this time, not only are you always going to be vulnerable while doing it, but now the enemy has not only air dominance, they have a live updated ISR. The ISR was fantastic, like astonishing, and they of course could not only do that with satellite imagery and so forth. We could clearly see that the expanded espionage infrastructure, the Mossad and whatever, have been able to recruit so many operatives within Iran that they could even know exactly where the IRCG commanders were going to have their meeting, even if they were not communicating, even if they were trying to avoid surveillance in that regard, right? So this is it's like, but I'm hesitant to actually say that the Israelis did that well, because I like, after all this, and the more I'm looking at the Islamic Republic, they look so weak and pathetic. They look so much paper show and so much political theatrics that I'm kind of like, look at the water crisis they're enduring. They're on the worst estimate over 50 million. This is a country of 90 million. Over 50 million is be forcefully relocated. This has nothing to do with Israel. Israel could just have sat back and just waited for the whole country to collapse. And so that's
what Netanyahu said, right? That's literally what Netanyahu says, that Israel actually don't even need to do anything. Eventually the regime will collapse. Because I have the same feeling. I was expecting Iran to be a lot stronger, and I was shocked when you first told me that they have water crisis. I was like, what? So I went to look into it a little bit. Then I was like, fuck, they really actually have a water crisis. How can you have a water crisis? You are just next to a freaking inland sea. So that was a surprise to me.
Yeah, the Nika actually came on at that time too to corroborate it, and he pointed out on the factors that the biggest reasons for it. And one thing is basically mismanagement and corruption, which are tied to two policies that kind of ran amok. One was a policy of autarky when it comes to agriculture. And autarky is basically just self-reliance, and which makes a lot of sense when you are the Islamic Republic. You just take power, and you're immediately hit with a bunch of sanctions and all that kind of stuff. So of course that makes a lot of sense. But they decided to take it like all the way. And this was there were two things that hurt bad here. One, the crops that they were growing, sure, it didn't fed the population well, but it gave them a lot of money. and it was also not a crop that they were sanctioned from. So they just did it preemptively to be secured, but also from partially like ideological, if you want to put it like that. It makes sense to have a policy of autarky, and I know a lot of people, and I myself, I'm favorable towards that policy to some extent. But they took it to that point, to the level where also the corruption that was pertaining to it was not adequately addressed, and so a lot of water was spent on a lot less profitable crops that used way more water, and it was managed worse. And this was compounded even more so with not only bad maintenance throughout like what civilians themselves are using, but they also went completely amok with building dams. Because the thought was basically more dams, more power, and more water for irrigation. And yeah, that is in a sense true if you actually have the waterfall for it. But they didn't have the waterfall for it. So these dams, you just ended up having a bunch of dams, many of them with a lot of expenses that didn't even produce anything because you didn't have enough rain to fill them all. And you kept using more than you could spend. And so what kept on happening then was that, of course, they tapped into the water, like below the water, my brain is blanking, but the subterranean waters, aquifers. And they took it to such an extent that it became nominal, a regular occurrence, that you would have like these sinkholes that take entire buildings, swallow neighborhoods around both in Tehran and a lot of places in the country. Which is something like it has happened in Europe too occasionally, and this gets a lot of protest. Like people don't like to be having like, oh shit, is my house going to suddenly just sink into the ground? But this was happening time and time again all over across Iran. And for well over a decade, this has been a very prevalent and well-known problem. It's like, of course, if you're living in that, it's going to be kind of, it's yeah.
It's also that it's a country that's focusing more on other stuff than their own citizens.
Exactly.
Because you can avoid everything. If you have even a water problem, you can
Well, I mean, if you don't have the water problem, right, then people are going to be willing to accept a lot more. But if the water and many other things, now you can't even buy fuel, the inflation running amok, then it's not surprising that you will also among the chance of the people, they will say like, screw, nothing for Gaza, nothing for Lebanon, all for Iran, right? Of course. Why would you want to be spending your resources in something far flung away when your home countries is falling apart? I mean, this is a very reasonable complaint that we also have. Here in Norway, for example, we're slashing across pretty much everything across the board. We're closing schools and things like that. And real wages are stagnating. Yet at the same time, we're still just pushing more and more money through so-called humanitarian aid just to kind of have our soft power, which we don't see, like Norwegians often don't even see, like, where is this even from a purely geopolitical sense making sense? But you're just wasting our money while you're trashing. And our situation in Norway is arguably enviable compared to Iran. So it's
I already been happy that my prime minister managed to stop these Russian assets that are saved us a lot of money and even a bankruptcy. So I can speak a little bit positive about what's happening in my country, but less about Europe, for example.
I heard Belgium is now a pro-Russia country.
Yeah, apparently.
Did Belgium stop like the seizing of Russian assets and trying to?
So what they did actually, they changed it by Europe did like